This episode of the All Automotive Podcast is brought to you by our friends at GeForce Automotive. GeForce Automotive is a certified service center through Auto Value. Want to make an appointment? Go to their website at www.geforceautomotive.net. Click on the banner that says Make an Appointment and make your appointment today. And now, the next episode of the All Automotive Podcast. All right, welcome back to another episode of All Automotive. I'm your host, Matt Clawson, and today we are talking to, once again, my good brother, Jeff. He's here with us today, and we're going to be talking more and more about vehicle restoration. Last week, my wife was telling me, because we bought that truck, and I know I told you that. We bought this 68 C10 truck, and we're going to revamp it. So we're going to overhaul this thing and restore it back to what I want it to be. And she was asking me the other day, she's just like, so where do we start? I mean, what do we do? I mean, I know that since I've bought it, I went and got a LS engine for it, and I've taken it all apart almost. Still got to take the cylinder heads off and assess the inside of it yet. But that was one of the things that I wanted to start with. But as far as that goes, the mechanical part, for me, it's not a big issue, but when it comes to restoring a car and where's the starting point? And Jeff, tell me what your mindset is when you went to do. Well, let's just use your Charger, and I know that car, that was a nut and bolt, like you told us. So, what was your mindset, and where did you just when you got that car home? You're like, what do I do?
Well, when I got that car home. And thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it. This is fun.
Yeah. Welcome to the show. Good to see you.
Yeah. So when I got that car home, I guess the idea was originally that I was going to fluff it up a little bit and, knock down the high spots maybe and then drive it. I was really wanting to drive it. Well, as, I started doing, the assessment on the car, it was apparent that it was going to need quite a bit. It ran and drove, and I did drive it I drove it about 50 miles to get it home, but it needed a lot. It needed to be safe, and so that's where, in this grand talk about, restoring a car, that's where you want to start is safety, because I think it depends on what you're trying to do with the car, what level you're trying to restore it to, but if you intend to use it at all, then, you have to start with safety and what is unsafe about the car.
Right. And that's a good place to start. And I guess tell everybody what year it is. What is it? It's a Charger. We're talking about it.
It's a 1971 Dodge Charger. I bought it as a running driving car. It is an automatic. It has disc front brakes. It was, like I said, it was altogether a running driving car. I ended up just to make the story short, I ended up taking the entire car apart. Every last nut and bolt was taken off the car and put back on and cleaned and painted and plated and honed and milled or whatever it needed, the whole thing got redone. Now that, it got carried away, but now it's,
right. And that,
now it's safe.
And that can be a daunting process. And for me, I'm just I'm super comfortable. I'm an ASE master technician. I'm super comfortable with the mechanical part. And what I mean by mechanical is, the engine, the transmission, the steering, the suspension, but it's the fabricating part and the body work. And, I worked at a body shop for a little while, but doing estimating and that was on newer cars. But, it's when it comes to sanding the body and putting body filler in there and doing that kind of stuff, I'm not so sure that that's going to be something that I'm going to be good at, because it's I've never really done it before. And, this is what we're trying to do is let people know this is some of the things that we want to do. And this truck is what I want to get done. And this is the paint job I want, and this is but how do we get there? And that's what we want to talk about.
And again, it depends on, the second piece of, safety. And then, as I said, what level you want to restore it to. If you want to restore it to, something that you're going to see on TV, or you're going to see at Barrett-Jackson, or you're going to want to take to a show and do points, and things like that, have it judged and those sorts of things, then you're going to need professional people to do almost all of the work. But that's the good thing about, guys like you and me. A lot, enough right. to know what not to mess with. I know enough to be dangerous. I don't sometimes know I shouldn't mess with something, so I just go ahead and try.
I think there's a lot of people out there like that.
Anyway. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there like that. But as far as those things go, you do have to, know what your limitations are. You can get, like, I tried to do the body work on that Charger, and after, a year of, picking away at it and figuring out what I, did and didn't know. I mean, I welded a bunch of the metal in, but then when it came time to actually make it smooth and put a paint job on it, I had somebody else do that. And that was one of the 2 or 3 things that I didn't do on that car by myself was the paint and the Bondo.
Okay, so that's something that we want to write down. And when we're looking at this restoration project, and I know that's something that I've wrote down, because it's like I'm talking to my friend Mike, and I got a really good friend Mike, and he gets into doing body work and so forth like that. And he's telling me how easy it is and how to do that. To me, it's just like, it's not. I don't know what it is. It's just like, okay, sand the Bondo. It's like sanding drywall in your house. Nobody wants to do it. How do those guys get up in the morning and know they're going to go and sand drywall all day?
Exactly.
It's just like the body shop guys, but they do it, and there's guys out there that just do a phenomenal job. And that's the other thing. You put that question in there too. It's like, okay, so I'm not going to do the body work. So we're going to sublet that out. We're going to do the rest of the stuff, but we want to get it done. But you want to know what you want to look for too. And that kind of person obviously should be somebody that is reputable, or wouldn't you think?
It's hard. Well, that's why that phrase body shop prison, exists, because you send it to the body shop, and they, body work is time consuming, or can be time consuming, right? Because you need to, there's no way to quickly block sand an entire car. That takes a long time. The guy that did mine was a friend of a guy that runs a body shop, and he was able to recommend, a relative of his that could do a good job. So that's how mine got done. Now the guy had the car for 18 months. Like I had to call him and what's going on, and and
I remember that.
Yeah, so, he worked through it,
and that's sometimes that's the guy you want, and if it's not, then you're not going to take it to an everyday body shop. Trust me, and that's something that where those people are banging out those repair jobs. You hit a deer and your car gets fixed in 2 weeks if the parts are available and that kind of thing. But, these restoration body shops and these people normally, you want to dig around before you really find somebody. And if you're into the restoration scene and going to car shows and stuff, there's always those people that you talk about. And I know we kind of touched on this a little bit when we talked in our last episode of the restoration part of it, is that, I find that a lot of these guys are very willing to tell you where they went. I mean, if they're pleased with it, obviously. And, is the guy good? He does really good work? And then, normally, and that person's going to be very busy.
Well, and you can, if you're talking to somebody at a car show, you can typically, they'll say, oh, who did your body work? And you can look at the car and see how good it looks. You can see, and guys like you or I, and anybody, with a little bit of coaching, you would know where to look to see if somebody's good at body work or not. You look inside the fender lips, you look under the hood, you look inside the door jambs, you look at the places that are hard to do. And if they look good, and the guy did the work, then yeah, but you're right. You might call that guy and he might say, well, I can't take your car for 3 years. Like he's got so much work. Right. So
and that's the other, that was kind of like a sub question of the question that we were, is like, where do we start? And now you got to figure out the things that you aren't going to do. How much longer is that going to take you? You know, this project, I really don't want this to last more than a couple years, maybe. I don't know.
Well, yeah,
I'm hoping that it doesn't, but you know, I'm the guy that's got a 87 Monte Carlo. It's been in my barn for 15 years.
Well, you know, that's the thing, you know, I'm
going to get to that one day.
You want to get them and you want to drive them, right? And so that would be something that those things that are like that, like, okay, you want to do the body. Well, maybe you do everything else first, so that you're driving the car along the way, as you're doing, different things. And then, once it's, and you're enjoying it. And then once your turn comes up or you get your ticket gets pulled at the body shop, maybe then, and then
maybe over there.
Right. And also, we talked about, I think we talked about my friend Paul, who's doing an MG. I've got pictures.
Wow.
He's stripping the body in his garage at his house, and he intends to, smooth it, and he's going to paint it. He's got a neighbor who says he knows how to use the paint gun, and so they're going to do it themselves. And you know what? And it's not going to be a show car, right? And he's probably not even going to turn out all that great. And I know Paul's going to listen to this. So Paul, I don't mean that it's not going to look good. I just mean that it's, you're doing it yourself and it's going to be what you did. And so that's going to be cool. And he's going to like it because he's going to see it, and it's going to be, he's going to know he did it. And that's a big thing with this stuff too, for me, is that, you did it. And it doesn't matter what other people think of it when you did it and you did it.
Right. And I happened to talk to Paul, like, I don't know. He found me somehow.
Yeah.
Anyway, he calls the shop and I end up talking to him. And, he's one of my brother's friends from college, and he's trying to do a restoration on an MG. And it was like, I'm talking to him and he's telling me all this stuff that he's doing and he wants to do and he wants to learn. And it's just like, that's great. That's what this is for. That's what this episode is for, is so that you can, be a chef like Paul.
Yeah.
And work on your own car that's an MG, that's an English made, maybe a harder project than somebody like him should take on. But why the hell not?
He's fearless, though. He digs right in. He redid the brakes. And, this is an MG. This is not like, going and doing a Chevy Camaro. This is an MG. It's weird. It's quirky. It's British. It's, Lucas Electrics, for God's sake. All this crazy shit that's in there. You have
your own set of tools when you have an MG.
Right, exactly. And he's like knee deep in it. I am impressed very much by his by how he just goes in there and he tackles whatever it is. And that's another thing. That's what we've been talking about. Like, you have to gauge whether or not it's something you think you can do. Honestly, like with Paul, if you think you can do it, he can do it. All you have to do is think you can do it usually, and he gets it done. So,
he was telling me about what he wanted to do, and he texted me some pictures of it. And he was stripping the paint off. I think it was the hood or something. And it was like, wow, go. He was asking me what kind of paint stripper. So I took a second and I called my buddy Mike, who knows about body work and sells the products that a lot of the body shops get into. And so he knew, and he's just like, oh, this stuff is the stuff you need to strip the paint. But you want to do it this way so that you're not, because Mike's got a little bit of experience in that.
Yeah, yeah.
He knows, he says, hey, you got to do it this way. You can't do it this way and use this stuff. So, yeah, and then that's the thing. Getting back to our question is like what level of restoration that we want to do. If you're doing a show car and you're not going to really be doing any of the work and you're just going to pay for it, then, that's one thing. But if we're going to do like a classic restoration, and I'll just classify it as that, as a classic restoration, that, man, I want to drive this on the weekends.
Yeah. Call it a driver. Yeah, it's a driver. So it's not going to be a 100-point car, and the undercarriage might not be perfectly clean, and it might rattle here and there, and it might have a few quirks in it. And that's for somebody that you want a driver. Those things are going to happen when you drive a car. It's going to wear, right? And so those things may happen, and it's going to break. And you don't, You're not going to drive. You're not going to go out and take a 71 Charger down for a very long ride and not take your tools with you just in case. You need to you have to have your travel tools, and you have to have, it's a Mopar, right? So you have to have your ballast resistor in the glove box, and you have to know what you're going to need to do, because they require a lot of TLC. That's just how it is.
Yeah, and if you're using old stuff and old ignition parts and old, even in my situation, I'm going to install an LS engine out of a 2002 Chevrolet pickup. That's a 6-liter with the 4L80E, and I'm going to put the engine computer in it and get a wiring harness. That's not that simple when you think about it, because you could get somewhere and it doesn't turn over. Well, why doesn't it turn over? It's because the security system that was on the original truck that is still kind of exists isn't working right, and you have to know, so your toolbox may be a little bit different, but you still need to maybe take some stuff with you, because it is a 1968 Chevy truck.
Right. Well, that's how it is with all of that stuff. Anybody that does anything with an older vehicle, I can go on Rock Auto and I can buy, a ballast resistor, but the thing, it was made 20 years ago. Like it's an old part. It's just, that's just how that stuff is. So you have to know. Every car is going to have like its quirky things. And once you have your car for a while, you're going to know what those quirky things are, and you're going to be able to, deal with them. And, that's, what the fun of it is, that's also, in that, at that level of restoration that you called it classic. We could also call it driver. That's where, you can probably do 95% of that yourself. Like maybe you take it and have the front end aligned or something, but even then, I aligned the front end of my Charger with a string and some sticks and some tape measures, and it works pretty good. It's not wearing the tires yet. I don't know that it's perfect, but you know what? For as much as it gets driven, it's not. It doesn't have to be. I'm not taking it on 500-mile road trips.
So. Right. Just want to take it to Solon to a car show.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So that's the other thing. Then that's what we were talking about too. Is like my wife needs to be able to drive this truck.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay. So, and then, I'm making, I need to make very sure that, she goes out to the barn, she can start it up and go to her dad's house if she wants to
be reliable. Yeah.
Go downtown or take it to school one day, in the early spring before she gets out of school or whatever. She's got to be able to get in that thing and go and not have to bang on the hood like Fonzie or whatever. And
yeah. Well, and that's why we live in such a cool time right now, because you can put, there are probably pieces that you can buy to put that LS motor right into that truck. Like it'll drop right in, and there is engine wiring harnesses and transmission harnesses, and then you can get your fuel injection working, and you can do all those things, and it'll be very close to as reliable as your day-to-day driver, because it has all the same systems. It's fuel injected, it's electronic, it's it's got all that stuff going on, so that when your wife does go out there, when Danny goes out there, she'll be able to turn the key and it'll start, because you're not fussing with a manual choke, and you're not trying to get a 50-year-old technology to work, particularly like she wants to take it to school in April. It might be 30 degrees when she goes out there to start it up. So you have a much better chance when you got the fuel injection. And any car, you don't have to put an LS motor in your vehicle in order to get those things. You can buy aftermarket fuel injection and aftermarket electronic ignitions. All those things can be retrofitted to any car pretty much. I mean, I think we talked about it. You might have had a little bit of trouble finding one that would fit on a GM straight 6, but
yeah. Well, what I found is the intake manifold is what's restrictive about it. So because the exhaust comes out of the same side, so it has to kind of go in between the exhaust manifold, and it has to work like that. But nobody really makes a 4-barrel Holley injection system. I don't recall. Unless they do, they can email me at gforceauto32@gmail.com and let me know. However, we have, I looked and looked and looked, and then Holley makes a nice little 2-barrel setup but it's for their straight six. And I was thinking about trying to get that to work in some sort of fashion on that one, but then I kind of came across this LS engine, and I think we're going to go that route with this particular build. But, and again, too, the engine computer and the harness, and you're right, we do live in a time where there's a kit you can get that's got the mounts that go right to the engine, that are built specifically for that truck, that had wherever that goes, so that the engine's far as forward or rearward as you want it, and then it allows for all the other stuff, and then there's mounts so that I could mount the transmission underneath there. And of course, I'm going to mock all that stuff up when I got the cab and stuff off of it. But that's something that I know that I can do. And maybe some of the fabrication part of it, I might have to kind of get the slide ruler out.
Well, I tell you what, that I don't know if I mentioned last time we talked, but I'm working on a 74 Jeep CJ, and the guy that I'm working on it for wanted to put a small block Gen 1 small block Chevy V8 in there.
Oh, okay.
So I ordered
in a Jeep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it had a AMC V8 in it, but anyway, there's a lot to the story. But I'll for the sake of the point that we're making now is that I ordered motor mounts. I ordered an adapter kit. I adapted the Chevrolet bell housing straight to the AMC 3-speed. It's a 3-speed stick.
What transmission did they use in that?
So I think it's an AX15.
So it's
it's a T. No, it's a T. It's like a T15, I think.
Oh, it's a stick shift.
It's a stick. Yeah, it's not.
Okay.
It's not an automatic. I don't remember exactly what it was.
So adapting the Chevrolet bell housing to that.
So So my point is that it's a Jeep T15. So my point is that I was able to go on the internet and in about 40 minutes find all the parts I needed to order to put a small block Chevy V8 in a 1974 Jeep CJ. And so if you can do that, and I put it all in, and it all worked exactly the way it was supposed to work, and everything went together and turned out really nicely.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the car that you're going to buy. I C10s that's specific year range from 67 to 72. There's so much stuff for those trucks that it's not even funny. And you're right, you can go online and get that stuff and find it really quick. And I was impressed about how quickly I found an LS installation kit for that generation truck. So that being said, let's go back to your Charger for just a second. The 71 really wasn't the most popular one. We're talking Dukes of Hazzard.
It was the coolest.
And yeah, they are. They're really cool. I loved it. Yours is what, from 71 to
71 through 74 was that same shaped body. There's a lot of differences between the bodies, but they were that was all the same, general body style, that sort of big, wide, chunky rear end and the long front hood.
With the little turn signal things on the fender.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of Mopars had those as silly things up there.
Right. So, so you're doing this kind of needle in a haystack job of a Jeep that had a V8 that the guy wants a Chevrolet V8. That's not a simple process. And those are the things that you want to look at too when you're choosing your vehicle. It's like, are there parts readily available for them, or are we going to have to manufacture a lot of stuff? And that just adds time. If you've got to manufacture or fix things that aren't available anymore, then that's one thing you want to look at too.
Right. Well, and that's one thing that when I bought my Charger in 1998, because as you mentioned, it was one of the that wasn't the popular year. All of the popular years was 68, 69. And then if you went to the original, like the 65 through 67s, those were also, popular. But the 71, nobody was making hardly anything aftermarket for those. So now you live in we live in a time where the year one catalog has, every piece that you might need. I remember when I went to I wanted to buy new turn signal lenses for my Charger, and I was at some swap meet in the early 2000s, and the only thing you could find was new old stock, and they wanted $300 for a set of two. I'm like, I got two kids to feed. I can't be spending $300 on two little pieces of plastic, for goodness sakes.
Exactly.
So, but now you can go online again, and in 20 minutes buy a reproduction set that's Mopar approved for $80. Or $90 or so, or $100. I haven't looked lately, so don't hold me to those numbers. But the point I'm making is that you can get a part that looks and fits and functions, correctly. They look exactly like the part that you need, and they're not that expensive.
So let's go over some of the things that we've talked about. We want to, where do we start? We kind of cleared that up a little bit, hopefully for everybody, with what level of restoration do you want to do? When that's kind of maybe where you start. And then is it going to be a show car? Is it just going to be a garage princess and it's going to sit in there under a cover and you're going to take it to one car show a year? Or you're going to enter it in, Barrett Jackson to try and get, top dollar for it because you did do this overhaul. And there's all these overhauling and car restoration shows that are on TV, and they make it look easy, but I think some of that stuff is it gets a little difficult, and especially and those guys have teams of people helping them get these cars done. When I talk about recently, I took a trip to Dallas and I went to Gas Monkey Garage, and thankfully I ran into Richard Rawlings and said hello to him, and that was cool. But let's take his show for instance, and he's got a lot of people helping him do those cars.
Right.
And, if it's just you and your friends and that's something that they're going to come over and do because, guys like me and you, Jeff, I have like Mike and maybe one other guy that might come over and help me do some stuff on it. And of course, Danny told me she would get dirty and get in there and do some stuff on it. 'Cause obviously, she's involved in the process. But again, that's the thing that we want to do is figure out where we wanted to start, and that was the biggest question of the day the other day, and I was just like, that's a good question. I was thinking about that, and I wanted to know. I wanted to get further with that question and think about. Well, I think we're just going to start taking it apart, whether it's
yeah. Well,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, you just need to start somewhere. It doesn't really matter where you start. Like we were saying earlier, if you're going to drive it, then you do one thing at a time. If you're not going to drive it, then maybe you want to blow the whole thing apart and put it in baggies and boxes and label it up and do the whole thing. That's kind of the way that mine went down, is like, I would, if I had a few days, or some free time, I would take the heater box and I restored the whole heater box and put it on the shelf. And so that's how you go about that. And so, what you want out of it, you have to, maybe you pick away at it or maybe you go whole hog. I would suggest maybe picking away at it at first until you lived with the car for a little while is probably the better way to go, because you can always, take stuff apart, and sometimes stuff doesn't always get, put back together. Life sometimes, gets in the way of some of those things.
Right, because Danny wanted to drive it the other day, and it's apparently got a little bit of a brake fluid leak from the rear. So I was under there checking that out, and I'm like, okay, well, there's some lines across the back that probably need to be addressed. And, once you do that, then are the things going to come loose, and are we going to be into wheel cylinders and lines both sides and all the way forward? And this thing doesn't have power brakes. You push it. It's your leg power that's pushing everything down. So, and that makes it a little bit more difficult too. But, so I filled the fluid up, pumped it up, and it didn't seem to drip too much. So she wanted to take it around the block and show her dad, so she did. She pulled the choke
Yeah, that's the fun in it, though. And so if she wants to do that stuff, then you leave it running as long as possible. Like maybe you rebuild the engine you're going to put in it without taking the old one out. Like let it be a truck while you're working on all these other pieces, you know?
And that was the thing too. And that was my question back to her. And your point, you were saying too, maybe you work on it and then drive it, work on it, drive it. And that's, I think, and I kind of said, do you want to just rip it apart to start with, or you want to maybe get it going and drive it this summer? And I'm thinking she was leaning towards driving it this summer, but it's a stick shift, so it was a little challenging.
Yeah, well,
at first, but it's got that really low first gear, so it was like,
just start in second and then just shift once. Yeah,
basically, over into fourth gear.
There you go.
Yeah, but you can't really go very fast with it because the brakes. I mean, literally, it's got drum brakes front and rear. And if you're a mechanical guy and you know a little bit about brakes, and it doesn't have disc brakes in the front or power brakes, so it's like, so don't go very fast. Go that way. Go slow. Go down.
And so maybe the conversation finishes up about where it starts, which is with safety. You always got to think about, how safe is this thing? Now, when they were brand new, that's all they had, right? And but all the parts were brand new, all at the same time. And so, you think about if you're going to redo the whole brakes, like going for, like, again, that could be a project that could be done in a weekend, like a disc brake conversion in the front. You don't need to blow the whole vehicle apart to do that. So that's something you do over the weekend, and the car stays.
That's something that I was looking at too. I'm looking at how do we get power brakes on this thing, number one.
Right.
And then number two is where is the disc brake conversion kit, and what, I would think, something that's got a pretty decent spindle and, change the ball joints or whatever and get that whole set up, and then get a proportioning valve so that you can get the pressure that you need to those disc brakes. But yeah, you're right. It's just like, I think there's going to be some things that I'm going to do to it along the way. And then once we get to the nuts and bolts of the real restoration, where you're sanding the bodywork and doing all that stuff, that might, then it's going to be down. Then we're not going to be able to drive the thing back and forth down the road to the ice cream store.
Right. Well, and that's just it. You have to decide what you want to do. And the best thing, I think, is maybe to do a few things while you're driving it, and then get what you really want out of it, and then go from there, and then then it just ends up becoming what you want it to be, as you want it to be. Like you want it to run and drive and stop right now, and that's all I want. I don't want it to sound. I don't want it to be loud and to be able to smoke the tire and do all these things. I want it to run, drive, and stop. It makes it simple, right? You know what you got to do.
Right, and then we were talking about, just like your buddy Paul, assess your level of ability. Do you want to learn all this stuff like Paul does? I mean, the guy's a chef at restaurants and stuff, and that's what he did for his. It's total, and it's a hobby. It's turned into more than I think a hobby for him. So yeah, just assess your ability. Do you already tinker with cars, or do you know nothing about cars and you want to learn? Okay.
Well, and don't be afraid to try something, because if it's not your daily, and you run into something. Well, the other thing that is great about the world we live in today is the internet and YouTube and these podcasts, and you can immediately look up, and it doesn't have to be like, you could look up how to redo the front brake calipers on a 1975 MG Midget, and there's somebody out there who has posted a video of doing exactly that. Almost doesn't matter what you're trying to do. So that's another way, and even if you're going to take it to somebody to have them do the work, it's good to watch those videos, because then you at least educate yourself on what they're going to be trying to do.
Right. Exactly. And, YouTube is very good. Very good. There's a lot of good content out there and if you get a hold of, somebody like that, and this is what they do, and that's what they've done is they've documented their process of, this is what we did to my MG, and it's decent where there's enough content to where you can see actually things getting taken apart, but it's not just, oh, bam, here's the rebuilt caliper. After I edited everything out, that's sometimes you want to see the process, and you're right. Educate yourself on that, even if you are, taking it to somebody like me to have something done like that.
Well, it's a fun thing to restore a car, and it's a fun thing to do the work. That, for me, is at least half the fun, is doing the actual work and figuring that out and using your brain and your hands at the same time. My day job, I sit on my butt and type on a keyboard because I use my brain for that, but I don't get to use my hands for that. So it's fun to use your brain and your hands. The same thing for Paul. You're using your brain and your hands in a different way. So maybe it doesn't seem weird that a chef who uses his brain and his hands on his day job is using his brain and his hands in the garage, and it's going well for him. So he
and it's awesome. Like I said, when I was talking to him, he was so excited about it, and he just wanted to learn. And he was actually telling me about a place that you could go and rent the space and actually work on your own car.
Yeah, and I think that's a really cool thing too. I think there are places like that, maybe not so much in the Midwest where we live, Matt, but I know I've heard of places on the coasts and in warmer areas, in warmer parts of the country where, it's a shop, and basically you can go in and rent tools and do all these things, change your own exhaust or change your own brakes, and there's a mechanic that'll look at it for you if you need. Of course, you have to pay for all this, but it's a way to learn. And if you've got no other way to learn, it's a way that that you can get stuff done. And I'm sure you could take a classic car or a car you wanted to restore to a place like that if you have that available. Where you live, and it's it's a way that you can go, that you can get some help and you can learn. So
and if you're in a position to where you don't want to do what you've been doing your whole life, there's opportunities in automotive. We're looking for technicians on the daily. We're looking for people that want to do it, want to get their hands dirty, want to do that. I taught for quite a while at a local community college. I taught automotive. I taught a general class, and that was one of my favorite classes because there was just such a melting pot of people that came to that class.
Yeah, I bet.
That were wanting to learn how to do just very kind of basic stuff, and to see if it was for them, number one, and number two, hey, maybe I got this project at home and I want to just do this yourself. And there's guys out there or people out there that want to save money, work on your own stuff, do your own brake job or do whatever, and again, just assess your level of ability. And if you're willing to do it and you want to do it, then give it a shot. There's like you were saying, YouTube's out there. There's places like my automotive repair facility. If you know me and you got questions, we get those calls. Trust me.
Yeah.
I get those phone calls from my friends and all kinds of different people.
Yep.
About, hey, I'm doing this. How do you guys get this off? And, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, with this vehicle that you've bought, do you want it on, set a completion date? Do we want to do 2 years, 3 years? Sometimes it's difficult to set a completion date. And I mean, what were you thinking when you did yours?
It turned into because mine turned into a multi-year project because of, if you read any of the magazines, they always say, well, then life got in the way and you had kids and blah, blah. And that happened to me. I didn't start out. I started out like, oh, this is not going to be very long. And then all of a sudden, the whole thing is all the way apart. And you're looking at it going, well, I used to joke with people like it's halfway done because I've had it all the way apart. So now I just put it all the way back together and it'll be the rest of the way done. But I didn't have an outlook for it on that car. But then as time went by, I would set out like by the end of this year, I'm going to have the whole interior redone. By the end of, by my birthday this year, my birthday's in June. So halfway through the year, I'll have the motor rebuilt and on the stand and ready to go in. And so I did start setting goals like that along the way that helped me,
All right. Yeah, cool. Set small goals, set short goals, like take a section of the car. Like you were saying, the heater box. I took that all out, took it all apart because I got time to do it. Bam, it's done.
Boom, and then it's sitting on the shelf, and then you've got all your, your assemblies and stuff that are detailed. Then you start putting it back together. You're just pulling stuff off the shelf. But that's how it evolved with the Charger. At first, I had no clue because it was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. But like with that Jeep that I'm telling you, I brought that car to the house in November, and we pretty much said, I want to have it done by the fall because I don't want it in my shop again over the winter. So it's got to be done by the fall. So that's why we're working towards that. And that, we probably won't hit that, but we'll probably get it done this year, So anyway, because otherwise you'll never drive them and you'll never get to use them and do the fun part, do the fun stuff. So you have to push yourself, to get them done. And that doesn't sound like, that doesn't like makes it sound like work. But I guess what I mean is if you want to have the fun, then you got to do the work.
Yeah, and just have a game plan. Set your game plan up. Try to stick to something, see what you want to accomplish, and sit down and figure it out. It's like today I want to get the door panels off and get this door all apart and assess all the stuff that's in this door. Okay, so we're going to need a window regulator, the window felt, the channel run. We need all this stuff. I can take all this stuff out and set that over there. Write the stuff down so that you know what's going on, and then and move on.
Well, and then that also breaks it up money-wise because, like in your example, you're taking the door apart, you need these parts. Well, then you go over to the Classic Industries catalog or whoever it is, and you order up your parts, you get your parts in, you put your door back together, you get it all working the way that it's supposed to work, and then that piece is done. And not only do you – because one of the things that you'll find that you need something to make you feel like you got something accomplished. You put the door back together and now the window goes up and down and it's and everything works the way it's supposed to look. You're like, awesome, that's now done. That piece is done, and you feel good because you went through and you have reason now and also now you can tackle the other door or the other 3 doors because now you know what to do, and it makes the other ones easier. And they go quicker, and then that starts to snowball, and you got a lot of momentum, and then all of a sudden you're feeling really good about the whole project because you're getting stuff done.
And that's important too, because if you get frustrated with it, take a break, but make sure you go back to it because then you have an 87 Monte Carlo in the corner of the barn for 15 years.
Well, it's one of those things like, well,
it does run. I got it run.
It does run. It does run.
So now it needs a gas tank and a fuel pump. Yeah, I had to drop the gas tank down because, gee whiz, a guy who works on cars left gas in a car for over 2 years.
Yeah, now it's all cruddy. You just get a boat tank.
Oh, I got a new tank. The top part of it was rusted where the fuel pump goes. So that was kind of neat. It's got and to let everybody know, my 87 Monte Carlo was all original until I decided to put a 1996 Chevy Camaro engine in it, which is the old style LT1, just before the LS engine came out. It has aluminum heads. It's got the 4L60E. So it's pretty cool. The computer runs it, and it does start and drive and run. And so I got to a certain point with it, and I was like, got frustrated with it. There was some things that I couldn't accomplish quite because it's a speedo-driven car. The cable drives the speedometer in the dash, and I didn't. At that point, I was not spending the money on a digital dash part. But I think if I did it again, that's probably the way I would go. But anyway, it was one of those projects where me and my guys at the shop were like, let's see if we can do this.
Yeah, right. Make it work. I remember when you were going through that and trying to get the vehicle's electronics to work with the engine's electronics and the transmission's electronics. And so, yeah, I mean, that's part of the fun too, is like everybody's telling me that this isn't possible, but I think it's possible.
Well, it certainly was possible. It was just mating up 1980s technology to 1996 technology. It was a 10-year difference in technology.
Yeah.
So I had a engine computer now, and I had O2 sensors, and I had to make sure the transmission shifted correctly because the transmission and the setup it came out of had a 342 rear end, and this has got a 373. So I had to do some programming, and so there was some things that I had to do to it. But yeah, so again, going back to my original comment was, if you get frustrated with it and you have an issue with it, make sure you get back to it, and it ends up being a passion. And I think with this truck, I don't think that's gonna fall into that category, but the Monte Carlo is currently for sale. So,
well, and that's the best thing when you realize that you are not going to get to it. How many times I've stopped and like ask somebody, is something for sale, and they say, no, I'm gonna redo it someday.
Right.
And it's like, you know what? There's already rust up to the door handles. Do you honestly think you're going to get to that someday? And instead of having it rust and turn to dust, there aren't that many of these cars left anymore. So, when you lose interest or when you get, to the end of whatever you want to do with it, move it on, let somebody else, go through it and work with it and save it and have fun with it and learn on it and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So, wow, we went over quite a lot of stuff, and we're I hope everybody got a good idea of, if you've just bought a project car and you want to know what your starting point is, hey, assess the safety and let's try to figure that out. Is it something that we want to drive every day, and while we're working on it and we're going to do some stuff like Jeff was saying? And then, is it going to be a show car, or is it going to be a daily driver car? Or is it going to be, I'll call it my classic driver, to where, I want to go, once I'm done with it, I want to go to car shows with it, and I want to be able to keep it up, but I still want to kind of do some things to it. Cause once you get it to a certain point, you're just driving it back and forth to the car shows, and then maybe another project comes along, and that's another thing that you want to get done and move forward with.
Right.
And, like we were talking about with Jeff's friend Paul, assess your level of ability. Whether you've tinkered with cars or not, or you want to tinker with cars, try some, and I say easy things first. There's always things out there that seem daunting at first, but, if it's doing your own brake job and then you get confidence with that, and then that kind of snowballs into something else. And then if we've bought this car already and we don't really know, start with the small stuff, start with, cleaning things up and figuring out how things work. And again, YouTube is a very good thing because somebody has posted a video about it, most generally.
No matter what you're trying to do.
So once you've got your level of ability assessed, then we want to start setting a completion date, or maybe tackle things slowly as you go through, and then maybe make an outline of the car. I want to do this, I want to do that, and then I want to do this. And like you were saying, Jeff was saying, get to the point where you get it done by a certain date. I want to get the doors done by June, my birthday, and get moving on it. And then we kind of talked about being frustrated with it. We all get to that point. It's something that happens. And in my case, it's 150 yards back out to my barn. I can walk back up to the house and forget about it for a while. Because there are things that, you get frustrated with trying to figure, and especially with maybe the build that I'm doing where I'm swapping a new technology engine and transmission into something that didn't have any kind of technology. So that can kind of be daunting and maybe get you to a point where you're like, but, again, just step away from it, take a deep breath, keep going with it. All right. Well, we appreciate you being on the show. It's great to have you again. I know we talked about a lot of stuff, and thanks for coming on, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on. I enjoy this a lot. I'll talk about cars with anybody at any time. I appreciate being able to do it with my brother, and I appreciate having a chance to hopefully help other people, get into the hobby and have fun with it too. And so, yeah, thanks very much, man. I appreciate it.
All right, that's going to do it for another episode of All Automotive. And hey, when you're on your favorite podcast site, hit that follow or subscribe button. It helps us let you know when there's a new episode. Until next time, I'm Matt Clawson. Hey, thanks for listening to All Automotive.